What's up, guys? It's Uncle Freedom coming to you before I go to work tonight. I'll get off tonight about midnight. Merry Christmas to those of you, and I hope you had a great one. It's that time of year. It's getting cold outside. It's incredibly cold down in my basement right now. First and foremost, shout out to the primary supporter of this channel, and that is Outlast Supply. The good folks over at Outlast Supply have literally done what it would look like if I curated a store with gear in it. Everything that I like is in this store, and that's one of the reasons I agreed to partner with them. They're also, their values and morals as a company align with very much so with what I do. So yeah, if you're looking for some gear, everything from lights and laser aiming modules to optics and survival gear and food, go over and check out my friends outlastsupply.com. Good folks over there. Also, I should preface this, YouTube, I'm not selling a firearm. I get no financial monetization, compensation if people buy a firearm or anything like that. I'm not selling firearms. I'm also in a safe area of my home, which I maintenance and work on firearms. I have to do that because YouTube keeps flagging videos. So today we're going to talk about something. We're going to talk about the truth about budget, guns, and gear. That's right, I said the truth. There is an uncomfortable underlying truth that comes with budget firearms and budget like gear. And what do I mean? So everybody loves finding a diamond in the rough and a good deal, right? Like I talk about this in the Ultimate Patrol Rifle video. Yes, we are clear. With my UFDR1, which is this pretty little thing here, I saved some money by going for that Geisley Blim lower, right? I was able to get something more expensive for a lesser value to build that out the way I wanted to, saving myself some money in the process. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about cheap budget gear. Now, what's the issue? So typically when we see this argument shows up in your local gun store, internet forum, you name it, attached to something that sounds a lot like, well, it's just as good as anybody else's Knight's armament. It's all you're doing is paying for the name and the roll mark. You're not actually getting anything. You don't need to waste all that money. By the way, somebody actually left that comment on, I pinned it, by the way, on the UFDR1 video, which was, $4,000 is just dumb. You didn't spend the money. I did, and I'm happy with what I did. I don't know why you're more upset about where my money went than I am. Doesn't make any sense. And a lot of that is we interject ourselves into other people's stuff all the time and have opinions about what they do with their personal life that you probably shouldn't have. You should move along. Life is much happier if you just worry about your own problems. So that's where it shows up, right? You don't need that. You just wasted your money. And typically, it's almost always backed up with this coping strategy, and it sounds a lot like this. You just wasted all your money buying all that. You should have bought you an Omni or a PSA and then spent the rest of that money on ammo. Here's the crux, though. Nobody ever spends that money on the ammo. I don't know how many times I've heard this argument. Oh, buy yourself that Omni, for $400, then get over there and go buy you, $700 worth of ammo, go out there and train, right? So you get the most out of it. But nobody ever spends the money on the ammo. Why? Because it's not the sexy part, right? Spending the money on the ammo also means that after that, we have to shoot that ammo. We then have to go to the range and run it. And if you actually did those things, you would realize why that thing cost $400. So nobody does it. I will never understand why that's the argument we've created in our community. I don't get it myself, quite personally, but it is what it is. I mean, I kind of run it akin to this. That you would never buy a car knowing that almost every time in that car, except for a few outsider expectations, the motor on that car will blow at 1,000 miles and then immediately load that car up and go on a 2,000-mile road trip. You would never do that, right? Because we know it's not trusted, tried, true, and it's probably going to fail. Why we do that with firearms? Because make no mistake, when you buy your budget firearm and then stick it inside of your closet for just such an occasion, when that such an occasion shows up and you realize it doesn't work, that's the last day you get to breathe. Same thing, right? Much more dire consequences, right? Hopefully when it fails on your average range day. But guns and gear, and the gear that we mount up to what we're doing, like I said, is life-saving equipment, and we should strive for the best possible options and the highest quality, and then go out and vet it, because just because you bought something nice and expensive doesn't mean it's going to work, right? I've said that a bunch of times, man. Just because you spend a bunch of money on it doesn't mean it's great. You got to go vet this stuff out. The next argument is always the same, and how many times have you heard this? Oh, yeah, but their warranty is amazing. I hate that argument so much. And one of the biggest ones that we see brought up with their warranty is amazing is Vortex. Now, here's the thing. I love Vortex, as evidenced by the fact that I have a UH-1 Huey on this rifle. I like Vortex optics. I always have. I think for the amount of money that they cost, a lot of times they punch very high above their weight. But we can't ignore the fact that their warranty is amazing. And the reason that we know their warranty is a selling point for Vortex is because it gets used a lot. Right? That's the part of the warranty argument nobody's talking about. Oh, their warranty is amazing. How do we know it's so great? Because it gets used all the freaking time. And if a warranty gets used constantly, that means that it doesn't work as well as you hope it will. And also, if we're talking about the SHTF world, there's no warranty department. It can't fail. It's got to just work. So if we look at other companies in the optics sphere, Night Force, Leupold, etc., they have the same warranty. Like, you destroy their optics, they will replace it. Leupold will absolutely take care of you. I've broken a Mark V before because it fell out of a truck. Absolutely got my stuff fixed. Same kind of warranty that Vortex has. But nobody talks about Leupold's warranty because it really doesn't get used that often. I know of Night Force optics that have been shot and still functioned as they were supposed to. But then again, like I said, if it rarely gets used, we don't view the warranty as a selling point. But we do view the warranty as a selling point because somewhere subconsciously, we know we're buying somewhat subpar gear, but it's okay because when it does break, we get the warranty. The other one I always hear attached to this is, well, I'm just going to get it, I'm going to run it till it breaks, and then I'll buy something better. Why? What if tomorrow your money's no good and that's just what you have? I bet you'll be wishing you had spent the money to get the better option. Buy once, cry once is a real thing. Now, that's not saying that if you don't know any better, that's okay. Then it's a learning experience. But if you willingly know better and you do it just because, it doesn't make a lot of sense from a financial standpoint, especially considering most of the people that do that then argue with me about how they can't afford better ammunition. I mean, it's that old adage when it comes to stuff, and we see it a lot with like PSAs. You know, oh yeah, I've had my PSA for 5 years. Works great. Everything works great if you never use it. That's a harsh reality to budget stuff. It all works forever. If you don't use it, you don't run it. The hard truth is that most of the things that budget companies are actually counting on, and like I said, I'm not bashing what budget companies do, right? Because I am an affiliate of Primary Arms, which I love their optics, even their budget optics. I am an affiliate for Palmetto State Armory because I like what they do. And the thing is, it's no hate, right? Like, this is a PSA. Still clear, right? This started life as a Palmetto State Armory. Hell, one of my little just plinking toys that lives down here all the time, Palmetto State Armory with a Vortex Crossfire. Also clear, right? So clearly I don't have an issue owning them, but I'm never going to trust them as my sole option. The fact is, when we start talking about these companies, most of them are pretty much counting on the fact that the overwhelming majority of gun owners in America are never going to fire 1,000 rounds through the rifle they just bought. Most of the time, I know the PSA crew is pretty notorious for this. Like, they will have 12 of these. And then they'll tell you how they're just as good as anything else. You're just paying for the name. I've got 12 of them and they all run great. And they have like the highest round count on any one of the 12 is like 800. And then when it breaks, I'm like, yeah, but I had 1,000 rounds on it. Then we also got to look at the fact that most of the people that fall into this camping category really only take the rifle to the range once every few months, and they might only fire 60 to 100 rounds. If I'm going to go to the range and I'm only going to burn 60 to 100 rounds every couple of months, you're right. That PSA is going to last forever for me. Does that mean that your less expensive options are all bad, though? No. There are some amazing values for the money that exist out there. Things like the SLX line from Primary Arms. I have an SLX optic that's been on 11 different rifles. It's been dropped. It fell out of a truck, ran into a pasture one time. Thing never lost zero. It's still amazing to this point. A great example is the Romeo 5 line, right? These little Romeo 5 optics. This Romeo 5 optic has been on this rifle for 7,000 rounds. It just works, right? I can't complain about something that just works. Do I trust this as much as I would say trust something like an EOTech or an Aimpoint? No, I don't, right? But it doesn't cost the same thing, and I didn't buy them to do the same thing. Some of the less expensive options like Holosuns on handguns. Also clear, even things like Siley, right? This is the Siley Cat Pro red dot. This is a very inexpensive red dot. And I gotta be honest with you, it's baller, man. It holds zero. It's had the crap kicked out of it. It's got a great window size to it. There's very little notch filter. For what that thing cost, it's a home run. But does that mean, and then we can look at it too, and then we can even talk about some of the other stuff that's in this realm as far as guns go. The Ruger AR-556, the video for that should have already been up. 13,000 plus rounds on mine, and it's been a bomber rock star, right? The Savage 110 tack rifle. That Savage 110 tack rifle is one of the best values for a precision bolt gun to ever exist. It is phenomenal. I've had 6 of them. All of them were consistent sub-MOA printing guns. Like, they are awesome for what they cost. You're getting a chassis, AICS pattern magazines, heavy bull barrel, free float design, 20 MOA cant pick rail on the top, adjustable comb and length of pull on a stock, a decent enough trigger that you can adjust. Like, it's a 60-degree bolt throw and large bolt. It's a fantastic value. So they exist. Things like the Goon Beam Light, right? Aside from the fact that they get really hot, Goon Beam makes an incredibly hot, high outputted freaking light for very inexpensive money. But you need to understand when we start talking about things in the budget realm that while there are some unicorns that exist that do all of these things well, the odds of failure are much higher. So you have to vet those things accordingly. You have to do it. So if you buy a couple of PSA rifles and you go out to the range, you need to go out and run those guns hard and make sure nothing's going to fail so you can attempt to get a better working version of it before it moves forward, right? Same thing, like you talk about consumer electronics. There's a failure rate on a consumer electronics that just happens, right? Things are gonna break. Everything will break if we push it hard enough. The difference is, the budget stuff is not really designed to be run that way. It doesn't matter what the companies are telling you. So does that mean that our high-end stuff never ever fails, right? Does that mean like your bomber stuff never breaks down, right? Like the Acro or the Radian Ramjet or X300s. I don't know if I've ever seen an X300 break, so that's a bad example. The odds of it working are better. But that's a negative, Ghost Rider. Like, things break, man. Consumer electronics fail. It doesn't matter who makes them. I told you in the MOS instructor video that we had an Acro with the sacrificial front lens that came out of it. I've had Holosun 509Ts that the rear lens jettisoned out of when we had it. I had issues with the Radian Ramjet that I covered in the MOS video. I've seen RMRs that the windage and elevation just quit working on. It happens. Everything's got a chance, but I have a higher probability that I'm not going to see those issues with better made, more expensive stuff that's got better QC, because we're paying for quality control, right? The difference is, sounds expensive, right? If somebody pulled this out and went through this, still clear, this PSA Freedom upper, right? If they went through this PSA Freedom upper, you wouldn't see things like rifles coming out of PSA that have no rifling. That's happened. You don't see QC like that coming out of BCM or Roscoe, and you probably never will. Which brings me to another great option, right? So this little 10.5 This is a PSA gun that started life with an FN barrel in it. Now, everybody likes to say the FN barrel, like, oh, but it's got an FN barrel, right? FN is making that barrel to PSA specs. That is not a true blue machine gun FN barrel. Like, it's just reality. It's not, because there's no way they could afford to do it for the price of one of these. So understand that even if you get stuff with a brand name, sometimes you're just getting a stuff made to a spec that's not the same as what we would, see. Some other stuff that we saw about the high-end stuff, EOTechs with their thermal drift issues that they had, the battery drain that sometimes happens, parasitic battery drain on even things like the UH1 from Vortex. You still have to vet your gear, but you've got a better likelihood of it not working. Acros that failed all at once at one point. The 509, like I said, losing its rear lens. Streamlight switches failing randomly for no apparent reason. And the cloud defensive, like rain lights and handheld lights, flashing like it's a disco. It happens. But it's far less likely to happen if you buy stuff with more QC. And all of the warranties are the same, right? The warranty that exists for Streamlight to just keep sending you new lights exists for Cloud, it exists for Surefire. You just don't have to use it that much. So my final thoughts on this is no matter what you get, you need to go vet your gear. Go to the range, shoot, take a class, push your stuff hard, get it dirty, get it hot, see if it's going to work. Anything can have an issue, but understand that if you spend a little more money and you get something with better QC, that can is a much smaller thing than it is with something like a PSA, where you could have as much as a 50 to 60% failure rate if everybody went out and ran the gun. So truthfully, in this situation, 98% of shooters will never ever find a failure in their product. And this is where the kind of the harsh reality for people like me, talking to the average Joe Blow hobbyist shooter, right? The fact is, that hobbyist shooter may never find the failure in this gun because they don't run a gun the way I do. They don't need it to do what I need it to do. So they may never find that failure. So in that case, yeah, this is just fine. This is absolutely just fine for them. And you look at something like my UFDR1 right here, right? A lot of people don't need the capability I have with this firearm, right? With the suppressor and the mod light and stuff. But I will find the failure points in everything, and I will eventually find the failure point in this rifle as well, because that's how I run gear. So for me, it makes a lot more sense to drop the several big stacks of cash on something like this gun and build it out, and then still have some fun plinking toys on the outside, but understand what these are and understand that, no, it's not just as good. So like I said, 98% of shooters are never going to find the failure point that exists in these budget rifles, budget optics, budget lights. They're never going to find it. Does that make them just as good? Like I said, no, it really doesn't. It's good, and it's not just as good, but it is good enough for what you need. And those are very different things, and we need to address them within our community. Just as good isn't a thing, but good enough for you is a very acceptable thing. But coming over and bashing on a guy's build that he spent his money on, and I'm not talking about me, I could care less. But some of these guys that really did save their money and put in some hard work to get their dream rifle, and then immediately get crapped on by some guy with like 12 PSAs that all look exactly the same. Half of them don't have optics. None of them are built the way they should be built, but that's what he's gotten. It's just as good, bro. It's not. And we need to stop saying that to people. There's nothing wrong with it being good enough for what you need. But being good enough for you is a far cry from just as good when we start talking about some of these just very established brands like BCM and Geisley and Griffin Armament and Daniel Defense and stuff. Like they're not the same. They're never going to be just as good, but they are okay to be good enough for what you need. And that's totally fine and acceptable, but you need to be honest about that part of the answer, right? And I think that's where the crux comes. That's where the arguments start, right? Because, people see this guy and they're like, Oh, that's dumb. It's a waste of money. I never spent that much money because, oh, good God, right? I got my PSA dagger and it's just as good as that one. It's not. But it may be good enough for what you need. But you just look kind of foolish for telling everybody how this is just as good when it's just a fact it can't be. But the most important thing you can do today is to go dust off whatever that was that you had that's just as good to you or is good enough for you. Or maybe you have something that's far better than you need, but you're going to go work till it's good enough for you, where it meets what you need it to do. By all means, go dust that bad boy off. Go to the range, train, shoot some ammo, put some holes in paper, because after all, if you just own a bunch of gear and you never run it, I'm sorry, man. I don't care how much cool gear you got. If you can't run that gun, you just got trophies, bro, for showing up at the sport. So guys, I am Uncle Freedom. Hopefully you found this informative. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. And until next time, I'll see you later.